Hi colleagues, we're talking about the Quarterly Journal of Speech, and on this panel is Julie Beyerink, thank you, and Kylie Jacobson, and Josh Sauceda. Julie's going to start for us.
Okay, well, I'm going to start you guys out, and for those of you in the camera, you can play along too. We're going to do a little multiple choice quiz here. Okay, now when you think of whoever you associate with who invented penicillin, who discovered penicillin, I want you to stop me when I get to the card that says the discoverer of penicillin, the one that you associate. Okay, the card says Flaxen. Any votes? No. This one says Flanders. 1 vote, 2 votes. Okay, Fleming. Any votes? Okay. And Florey. Okay. The journal article that I studied was Cheryl Jorgensen-Earp and Darwin Jorgensen, and they were studying Miracle from Moldy Cheese. Now I got to tell you, that article, the name of that article actually popped right out at me. Chronological versus thematic self-narratives in the discovery of penicillin. And it's over the battle of these two gentlemen, Fleming and Florey, over who gets credit for discovering penicillin. Now, when I was in elementary school, that's one of the things that we learned about was Alexander Fleming, the mold on the slide, and I grew up knowing that. So I thought it was interesting that there was somebody else in the mix, Mr. Florey. Mr. Fleming was the one that found the mold on the slide. He was just about to throw it away. He worked for a hospital. And then he developed the penicillin because he saw that the mold was destroying the bacteria. Well, Florey is who actually developed it into something that could be mass-produced and actually save the lives. And so Fleming discovered, Florey developed. They both wanted credit. And so this article that I read was about the two different rhetorical strategies. Florey used a chronological scientific narrative where he basically went to the scientific journals and said, hey, Mr. Fleming was just part of a timeline of what happened, and he found this, and then this happened, and I added this additive, and voila, we have penicillin. Fleming used thematic self-narrative. What that is that he basically did use storytelling techniques. He went to BBC Radio and promoted himself, just kind of like you see people going on David Letterman these days. And he promoted himself, and he built himself a story. He said, oh, you know what, I'm just like you, I'm the little man just like you, but it was accidental, but it was destiny. And the public grabbed hold, the high school textbooks grabbed hold, and today Fleming is the one that we associate with, most of us associate with penicillin. And Florey, they both shared the Nobel Prize, so yay, but when you think of it, it's Fleming. So Fleming wins.
I neglected to mention my name, which is Eric York, and my slice of the pie was 2003 to 2005 in the Quarterly Journal of Speech. And the article I'm going to talk about is the rhetoric in mathematics, Newton, Leibniz, the calculus, and the rhetorical force of the infinitesimal. Took a little work to practice that. This article focuses on two areas that where rhetoric shows up in the study of mathematics, and it's really fascinating because it expands the rhetoric of science, technology, and medicine to include mathematics, something that, to my knowledge, is an under-researched area. And it focuses especially on one of the largest controversies in the history of mathematics, which is the discovery of integral and differential calculus in the 17th century. The article posits two ways that rhetoric plays a role in the development and rise of the calculus. One involves how the two discoverers or pioneers of the calculus, Newton and Leibniz, handled the criticisms that arose in the wake of their discovery. The other way that rhetoric is involved in the calculus has to do with the foundational proof for how the calculus works. And the author of the article argues that not only is there no mathematical proof for why calculus should work, that it's based only on a reasoned argument, he also argues that the two founders handled their criticisms very differently, although ultimately both distanced themselves in their work from the notion of an imprecise infinitesimal in the calculus. Newton went further in absolving himself from this and saw it as some kind of flaw in the theory itself, where Leibniz was able to accommodate it much more effectively in his later work. I think this article is important because it does open up an area of a yet untapped area for the rhetoric of science, which is the rhetoric of mathematics. And the author ends the article with a focus on some of the questions that are raised by this study.
I looked at articles in the years 2006 to 2008, and the article that I chose to talk about today is called The Culture of Science and the Rhetoric of Scientism, from Francis Bacon to the Darwin Fish, by Thomas M. Lessel. The basic claim of this article is that science is an evolution of religion. Lessel uses Francis Bacon's rhetoric to show that this relationship is in today's world, and he does so by promoting scientism in compressed iconography. He begins to do this by using books of the Bible to show that scientific advancement is divine providence during Protestant Revolution. He does this by quoting the book of Daniel. In it, it says, "Many shall go to and fro, and knowledge shall be increased." Bacon used a drawing of a parody. He drew a parody of the Pillars of Hercules. The Pillars of Hercules at the time symbolized the end of human advancement, basically the limits of what we could do as humans. And so his parody shows these walls opened and suggests that he's going to go beyond those pillars. He's going to advance learning. And he needed to do this with a biblical basis to prove to the church that it was an okay thing, that it was a divine providence at the time. So while Bacon did what he could to promote science during a time of change, Lessel argues that he doomed science to being submissive to the church and its leaders at the time. And he does this by comparing Bacon's parody to the Darwin fish. If you're unfamiliar with the Darwin fish, it's essentially the Jesus fish with the word Darwin in the middle and 2 feet drawn below the fish. Lessel poses the question of whether or not science has advanced far enough in today's world to become secular from religion. And he suggests that the hierarchical divide of the parody that Bacon drew and the parody of the Darwin fish offers enough division that it does. He argues that because the fish shows an advancement in evolution of the science, or of the Jesus fish, that it actually shows a divide between religion and science, showing that people are not associating it with the religion and in fact are not replacing religion, merely advancing it. Lessel has therefore analyzed how the culture of science gets promoted today with the Darwin fish comparison. In conclusion, Lessel argues that science has become its own master in today's world by comparison of the Darwin fish.
I'm Josh, again, for those of you that I missed it. Maybe my last name too. So the article that I looked at was Marcus Borowski's Deliberating International Science Policy Controversies, Uncertainty and AIDS in South Africa. And he examines sort of how cultural tensions can restrain scientific policy that would be, or that could be beneficial for those suffering from AIDS in South Africa. He specifically looks at President Thabo Mbeki in 2000. When he assumed presidency, he denied, not denied, but didn't allow the use of ARV drugs to treat AIDS, and he also wanted the cause of AIDS to be re-examined. He wasn't willing to accept, at least whenever he spoke, you know, what they really think and what they spoke, and maybe two different things. He didn't believe that the context for which, you know, they're researching HIV in the U.S. was the same for South Africa. And so he wanted to re-examine this, and Western, what Borowski calls kind of an orthodox way of science, is saying, no, you know, we've already established that, you know, HIV causes AIDS, and we've all this research is saying that ARV drugs, you know, will help you, So you need to, let policy be passed so that these people can start using these solutions, these medicines. And what Prosky examines is that the different kind of cultural contexts is that these two different sort of ways of viewing science. Lost my train of thought. Essentially, what Lebecki is doing is he's creating a epistemological filibuster. So he's saying that AIDS needs to be re-examined because he's kind of feeling threatened by the sort of one way of looking at science, which is the orthodox Western way. And it kind of echoes sort of that hegemony that sort of speaks to apartheid and sort of post-colonial South Africa, or colonial South Africa rather. And in the end, he says that the oversimplification of scientific disagreement fails to address the complexity of tricky intersections between scientific and intercultural rhetoric. And so Western critics saying, you're foolish or you're evil or you're wicked because you're not letting us, give you these drugs to use, or not letting people give you these drugs to use for your people, fails to kind of recognize that rhetorical cultural context that they come from. Whereas Lebecki also doesn't understand the sort of slow reaction time that happened here in the US during, I think, the Reagan administration with the AIDS epidemic, and how that kind of informs the rhetoric of orthodox Western science.
Thanks for listening to our panel.